All righty, we're good to go. The hour of 7:30 is here, and today is Tuesday, June 2nd, 2020. I'd like to call to order tonight's study session meeting of the Board of Education, please. Could I have a roll call?
Member Carter?
Here.
Member Demmett?
Here.
Member Patton?
Here.
Member Pulaski?
Here.
Member Fisher is here. Vice President Exum?
Here.
And President Hall?
Here. All are present. So I'd like to ask, are there any additions, corrections, or modifications to tonight's agenda?
None.
None. Okay. And did we get any citizen statements tonight?
No, we did not.
Okay. And nobody, I'm not in the building to see if anybody's sitting in the boardroom, so I'm assuming nobody's there either.
No one's in the boardroom.
Okay. I don't believe we have a call for an executive session after tonight's current meeting.
We do
So
not.
I will need, please, an approval of tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We get who moved and seconded there. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No, the motion carries. Okay, we'll move right into our administrative reports tonight. Our first one is from Dr. Ivory Tatum to talk about District's 2020 summer program, summer support and funding of the Self-Made Kings program with us.
So this was very short. I just wanted to bring back the appeal made. I met with Tracy Parsons, Community Coalition leader. Many of you know Tracy, and I believe Tracy, I can't remember who came with him to ask the district to support the group called Self-Made Kings. It is a group of young people from our high school. We have a couple of transitioning middle school students who might be involved. There is a change in programming for the summer. When the group came to you before, Preston James was the community outreach coordinator / community engagement person for the city. Preston has since moved to Oklahoma in the last few weeks. So I didn't know if the board was aware of that, but probably been 3 weeks, maybe 3 weeks to a month that he's moved. So there is a vacancy. The city is planning to post that position. They've been working on the job description. So I know they updated that, and they will be posting the community outreach coordinator position within the week. So that position is the position that worked with those young men from our high school, and it will be some incoming middle school students as well. I mean, middle schoolers transitioning to the high school. This new coordinator, when hired, will be working with the group. However, in absence of a new coordinator, and in light of, some of the earlier violence in our community involving some of these youth, Tracy, the Community Coalition, would like to continue the group working this summer and getting together. So if you remember last year, they got together once a week at their Urbana Neighborhood Connection Center. We had them come back and give a brief report to the board. They went on some outings. They went to DuDable Museum, to some restaurants. So they just got out and around in the community, and just some opportunities, exposing the young men to things they may not have ever been exposed to, and had a lot of frank discussions. There was always food involved in their meetings. So I think that was part of, one of the things I think that kept them coming. Preston often had guest speakers. I went over once and met with the boys. So we want to continue that group working. I know there's concern that as it's warm today, but as the summer months really hit us and it gets warmer and warmer, we want to have something constructive for those youth to do. So last year, the board committed $3,300 to that effort. It was a kind of try commitment between the district, the city, and the coalition. The coalition is on board with committing their portion of the funds again, and the city will be providing the same amount of support as well. So I just wanted to put that back on the board's radar. I don't have a lot of information yet about what the plans are for the summer in absence of a coordinator. One thing that Tracy Parsons and I did speak about is until someone is hired, you know, they may have difficulty finding someone once the position's posted. I know Linda Gibbons has been involved in these conversations as well. She's on here tonight. We've talked about having 2 staff members from the district kind of jump in to get involved with the young men, one of our social workers and a teacher. So they both have been approached. I don't want to say their names yet because I don't know if they've agreed to do this officially, but we've reached out to them to say, hey, would they be willing to step in and pick up the ball for the next maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and maybe longer than that. Until someone else is hired in Preston's position. I think our portion of that, if we do have our own staff working with these boys, our $3,300 would probably go to a small stipend for them. They're both teachers or educators in our district, and they're off the clock at this point. And so we would, of course, provide something small for the time and effort that they would be putting in to meet with them every week. And I think our portion of the funds often went to food. You know, we've met with Ms. Mitchell, and she's agreed to allow them to continue to be at the Neighborhood Connection Center. It is a small group. It is about 10 young men right now. So they would be able to meet per the COVID guidelines, because we can have gatherings of 10 or less. We'd meet in the big open space there on the first floor, spread the boys out so we could have 6 feet up, amongst them, make sure they're all wearing their masks. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there, see if you guys are willing to continue this. I'm hoping we can continue this. $3,300 is not a lot of money when you think about what we would be getting in regard to keeping, these young men engaged and off the street, and hopefully doing some constructive activities over the summer. So questions?
Any questions, anyone?
I just want to express my support for continuing this work with these young men. I really like the idea of having someone from the high school anyway involved, not just because we don't have Preston here, but because it helps those children to have someone that is stationed at the high school all the time as a familiar face and someone that they could go to when things are going on during the school year. So hopefully at least one of those that you approached would be interested. And I don't know what the possibility of going beyond just the 2 to 3 weeks until we find someone, but maybe looking at someone that would have a longer term vested interest in, us having the ability to maybe keep a familiar face with the program more long term. So, but I'm definitely in support.
So Tori, you bring up a good point, and I forgot to mention that. So neither one of these people are at the high school right now.
Oh, neither are, okay.
No, however, one of the people who volunteered their time throughout the year as part of the group is still affiliated with the high school, but again is one of our ESP staff. So, we've talked to him as well. I think, Linda, you've talked to him maybe. I know you were nodding a little bit. I don't know that he's going to want to commit to the whole summer, but it would be nice if they could have a familiar face. I mean, he knows most of the boys and was connected to them. Preston basically did the lion's share of the work. I mean, it was, part of his role in this outreach role. So he was there often checking on them and in and out of the high school quite a bit. So I know I've talked to Dr. Berenson. We've talked to Mr. Corson a little bit around, would there be someone else at the high school willing to kind of fill that role? So we don't have that yet, but right now in the interim, we're just trying to get a couple people who would be willing to just keep the work going through the summer, and then we can try to work on finding somebody at the high school. But you're absolutely right, and I agree with you 100%. We need someone on staff who is willing to kind of be that point person during the day.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
I'm in support of this. But it seems to me that when this was originally presented to us last year, they anticipated higher numbers than 10. So is the program available for higher numbers just because of COVID is the reason for the 10 limitation?
So there were more young men last summer. I'm saying right now the ones who are still hanging in there is about 10. And Linda, I don't know, does that count the 2 8th graders coming over to the high school?
I believe it does. I think
Okay.
10 was about the number it's steady number that they had.
And I think when I went over and met with them, there were about 15. And I think what happens is, they had the ones who came regularly, who were there every week. And then they had those who kind of, might be at one meeting and they might not see them for a couple more weeks. But, they were dropped off, they walked, they rode bikes, they got rides. So I think, it was however they could get there. I think Preston picked up some kids and brought them in his own personal vehicle and brought them to meetings. 10 is the rule for the summer right now until we're in a different phase. Right now, 10 is our gathering limit. So I think we have 10 designated returning students from this year, and then new boys that we would kind of have join the group who are going to be high school students. So 10 is about the group size that we're looking at right now, John.
Well, if the COVID, if we're able to move to phase 4 in late June, I would hope that the program would be open to additional individuals. In light of, the last couple of weeks, I think the more that we can make available to assist in promoting academic achievement amongst our African American males, we should put our energy behind that.
I agree. And maybe we can recapture some of those who, kind of petered out and, weren't regularly attending or weren't as involved. That might, depending on the 2 men who we've reached out to, they may have a better connection with them and be able to re-engage some of the young men that we've lost who weren't as interested in continuing. So.
Refresh us on how many days a week and what hours this is during the day.
They actually met in the early evenings. So like 6-ish, 5:36, they would have a little meeting and then have a meal. So the meeting was usually first, and then they usually, you kind of break bread and have conversations. So that's kind of what they were doing once a week. I think there were a couple weeks where they got together more than once a week if they took a field trip or did something special. But they met at least once a week last summer.
That would possibly help if we get a load more youth who want to be involved. If we could split it out, maybe X amount of people show up on one day to do this, X amount of people on another day, so we can capture more.
Sure.
That way we're trying to stick to our 10.
Yep.
For the COVID thing, unless by July that changes or something also.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good idea. And we have, we could group them by age. With these younger boys coming in, we would probably keep them with the freshmen that are becoming sophomores, and, maybe have like a 9th, 10th group and then an 11, 12 group or something like that. So they can have, similar discussions.
Sure. Or pairing them up with someone who went through the program last year, their mentor or something like that. I'm just thinking on the fly.
Yeah, we could do that.
To get more involved.
Yeah, I certainly support continuing the program, Jennifer. Thanks for updating us.
Sure.
I trust, even though Preston James is gone, that there'll still be some leadership so that it's as successful as it was last year. Carrying forward the kind of the main tenets and principles that, the focus that was really important that Preston brought to it last year, that maybe Tracy will make sure that those are continued.
I hope so. And maybe what I could do is when the job description is finalized, when they post a position, I could always, get a copy and email it out. I know they were doing some tweaking to it, just based on the position and how it is affiliated with the city work. Not so much this group, but just what this person would be doing for their, regular job. But once we get that, I can always share it.
Are there any grants or anything out there that we could possibly apply for to help funding for this? I mean, I feel thankful that, is it the city paying the other part, or
The city
the
and
police?
the community coalition paid
Okay,
the third, we paid a third, and the city. So it was about a $10,000 commitment from all three groups.
So speaking to this, I notice it's on our agenda tonight as an administrative report. Is this already in our budget, or do we have to, does this have?
So you guys need to let me know that you would like to continue it again. So that's kind of, I'm bringing you a little update tonight and seeing how you feel about that. And if you're interested in continuing, then we would put it on as a vote for next week. At our next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, most definitely. I think we're getting a tremendous value for our investment here, and we should continue it.
Linda, I know you've been involved a little bit with some of the community coalition. Anything you want to add since you're?
I just heard the point about the grant, and I will say that we are looking at a community grant right now. Unfortunately, I don't think that we would have the money for the summer, but it might give us some funds. I apologize. Someone's mowing the grass right outside my window. Bad timing, but I'm hoping that we will have funds that we could really continue meeting with students next fall and into the school year if the grant is something that we're able to get. It's a good program, and I appreciate everyone, being in support. Well, everyone that I've heard speak, be in support of it. I hope it will continue.
Yeah, you've heard from 4 of us,
So I've got Paul, Peggy, Tori, John,
all in support.
Ruth Ann.
I'm in favor of it.
And you're muted if you said something. And you're muted.
Here she comes. She unmuted. There she goes.
I've still been unable to hear Ann.
Yeah.
She's trying.
Hey, Ann, click on the caret next to the mute button and go up and select whichever mic you're using.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, she looks frozen now, so it may be connectivity issues.
Yes, that's what it might be. So I've heard from at least 6 out of the 7 of you. So I think you're in, okay. So we will put it on for an official vote since it involves some money for our next meeting. And hopefully by then the position will be posted. I could share a job description and get a little more information. I'm hoping they find someone. I know it's a very unique position. Very specific skill set of people, that person that they're looking for. So I hope they're able to find someone, and it isn't one of those positions that sits, for a month or 2 before they're able to fill it. So, oh, here she comes. Oh, I'm gonna readmit her and see if that helps. That help? I think you're back in officially. You just need to unmute.
Okay, how about now?
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Woo! Thank you. Okay, now I'm gonna just get my video on too, because that for some reason I switched off my phone because it was not cooperating. Okay, yay. I'm sorry about that, everybody. Technical difficulties. Okay, well, yes, I just wanted to say I am very much in support of this program. I think it's wonderful, and I'm glad you brought it to our attention. And just the second feeling I had was how disappointed I am that we have to do all the social distancing, because this is the perfect time for us to have a nice big group and all the outings and everything that they'd miss out on. So let's hope things get better for everybody. But thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Okay.
Okay, next up on the agenda, now that I've switched over my platforms here, thank you for that, Dr. Ivy Tatum. We do have the next up from you is the Press Plus updates from Press Plus 103, which I'm just going to let you start on that and explain everything.
And this one is a really basic, very, very, very minor changes. I only have one or two things. I'm following what John, I'm taking your guidance, and I'm not walking through all of the so I'm only highlighting, and again, there weren't a lot of significant things to even bring your attention. So if you walk through that, you probably saw it. So I did just only want to and our attorneys have previewed all of these sections as well. So of course they shared their input, and of course they've all said, all the changes are fine, nothing really of note. I did want to bring to your attention the drug and alcohol-free workplace 550. Remember, we adopted this, but we adopted it with a few changes per our attorney, Dennis. And the only changes here are really related to the footnotes, not the policy. And so footnote number 9 was just for us to talk to our board attorneys around provisions for the district seeking disciplinary action or dismissal of employees on the basis of cannabis prohibitions in the policy. So we've not had any issues with this. And Dennis and Susan have both been working with HR, and we have some protocols that we put in place. So I just wanted to if this looked a little different, I wanted to explain why for 550. The only one I really wanted to talk with you guys about is 790, is the provision for excusing students to vote. So I have that one in case you didn't print it out. I will share my screen here so you can see that. Make it a little bigger. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, so release. So it is a release during school hours. The provision, it basically calls for us to discuss whether or not we want to allow students to do this. So we would designate specific hours that students would be entitled to vote at a primary, general, or special election. They would be allowed to be absent from school for 2 hours in order to go, leave the building, go vote, and come back. And that is basically it.
And I'm assuming this will get changed again in short order, since assuming the governor signs it, the legislature has passed that that's now a school holiday.
Right.
Oh, yes.
Right. Well, I certainly support that. And as you say, it doesn't involve a whole lot of students. I mean, not a whole lot of our seniors are voting age, but there are some. And I think it sends a good message.
Okay. Yes.
So I have a question too about that. When they would be dismissed, would it be just the one time on election day proper, or would it also be on primary day? Did you say? I didn't know if you said that or not.
Primary, general, or special election. So
Okay.
They'd be any election that would be considered a popular vote in Illinois. They'd be allowed to leave for 2 hours to go vote.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I mean, I'm all in favor of getting more kids out to vote. And I know that in the past, we've had a lot of civics teachers at the high school who really push that, civic duty on our students, not push it on them, but, encourage them to take part. And I know that we've had students in the past who act as election judges. So I just think it makes sense that we'd be able to allow them to do that too. So it makes sense to me.
Okay. Anybody else?
Also in favor.
Okay.
Also in favor.
Okay. Well, sorry, Paul, what did you say
Oh,
there?
it's the same here. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. I'm kind of writing down the names. I heard Brenda. I think that's everybody. Ruth Ann, did you chime in yet?
Yes, I have. That's
Okay.
nice.
So we'll go ahead then and add this. Were there any other questions or anything else in the policy packet that you guys saw that you want me to highlight? I'm taking John's lead and not
Yeah.
walking you through every single one.
Well, Jennifer, I just had a question, back to 5.50 about,
Sure.
the footnote 7 that said it's, doesn't apply to us because we don't employ an SRO.
Mhm.
I mean, is that because we're not employing an SRO because of the pandemic, or is it because technically the city employs the SRO?
It's because technically they're city employees. They're not our employees. That's why. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep.
But actually, that just raised a kind of a related question in my mind. Given the pandemic right now, are we paying for our 2 full-time SROs? I know the budget.
Yep, and we've been using them for different things. So they've been out at the meal sites. Any event that we've had at the high school, Chad has been there. Any of our distributions, they're present for those.
Okay.
Graduation, yeah, he was there that whole day. Anytime they're doing summer school the next couple of days. He helped significantly with Chromebooks. So anytime we've had a large group gathering for anything, for distribution, they helped a lot with meals at the very beginning. So yes.
Okay.
When we need them for something specific, they're there.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, it looks like we will be taking a vote on that at our next meeting in 2 weeks'
Yes.
time on June 16th. So
We will. Thank you.
think of any other questions between now and then. Okay, moving on with the agenda on 9.0, we have 3 action items, which if anybody has any objections, we take them as individual items for tonight. That's okay. First one is 9.1, the resolution authorizing the demolition and removal of 109 and 109.5 West Washington in Urbana, which is just opposite the high school, on the building with the building behind it, I believe. And this is in keeping with our longstanding policy of developing all of the land to the north of the high school and around that area with our whole land development project. So are there any questions before we take a motion on this? Okay, seeing none, I'll need a roll call, please.
I'll move approval.
I'll move for approval.
Oh, move for approval. Thank you. Movement by John and second by Tori. Thank you. And now we need a roll call.
Member Carter,
Yes.
Member Demmett,
Yes.
Member Patton,
Yes.
Member Pulaski,
Yes.
Member Fisher votes yes, Vice President Exum,
Yes.
and President Hall.
Yes, motion passes. Second motion, just like the one before it, this is for the resolution authorizing the demolition and removal of 105 West Washington, which is just slightly to the east of the properties at 109. For demolition and removal of that property, also in keeping with our longstanding policy. Do I have a motion?
I'll move with the comment that for the public that the reason these are being torn down is because they're no longer habitable without significant investment on part of the district. So we're not, it's not just willy-nilly demolition. It is demolition with a purpose and a reason behind it. So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Member Carter,
Yes.
Member Patton.
Yes.
Sorry, John, I'm not used to having you in second in line. this
That's
way.
fine.
Member
Second.
Dennett,
I'll say yes.
Member Pulaski,
Yes.
Member Fisher votes yes, Vice President Exum,
Yes.
President Hall.
Yes, motion passes. And thank you for clarifying that, John. I forgot to point that out. It's in the resolution saying that it is structurally unsound and dangerous for public access. Just wanted to make that clear to everybody.
Hey,
Okay.
And before we move on to can I just ask the question about the status of the one property between those 3 properties, which is 107 Washington? Can you remind me what the status of that, it's the only one, will be the only one left standing in that stretch. Does anyone know the status of that?
So,
That one is still
Carol-
leased out. That one is in pretty good shape. It is still leased out. We have a family that has asked to stay there one more year. So we will be probably ending it after this next year.
Okay. Thanks, Carol.
Yeah.
And also, I think it's important to note that that one home does not, it was kind of outside the scope, right, of where we wanted to go for that first phase of the campus land use, that part of the project. We need those, what are the two numbers, Carol?
Well, 105 is in between, or I'm sorry, 107 is the one she's talking about. That's in between these two. But 113 is right at the T. Yeah, and that one is not in line to interfere at all with any of the campus land use improvements that we're looking at.
109 is the most critical right now to be able to have us even begin to talk about that first phase, which involved parking and, right there on Washington, that whole end piece of the project.
107 will eventually be part of the
Yeah.
problem, but not this immediate first phase.
The next one that's coming up, actually, that the lease ends in July is on Iowa, 114, I believe, or 112 Iowa, which is right on the other side of our empty lot.
Which will be required for the.
That one will be demolished. We're waiting for that group to vacate July, and then that one will be next.
Sorry, my internet crashed in there with everybody talking at once. Carol, is that the one that you said is directly opposite the high school in Iowa?
Yes, the one,
Okay.
I think it's 112 Iowa. That one will be vacated at the end of July.
Okay.
So that'll be next for demolition.
So that's pretty much on that side, that's the whole length of that street and will be cleared. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, well, thank you for the clarification, everybody. If there's no objection, I'll move on to the next item. Let me see, let me pull up my agenda. The 9.3 is to approve the intergovernmental agreement for the services between Urbana School District and the Urbana Free Library. And Dr. Norton will be just requesting that. We discussed it at our last meeting, but are there any questions outstanding before we take a vote?
I would move approval.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Member Carter,
Yes.
Member Demmett,
Yes.
Member Patton,
Yes.
Member Pulaski,
Yes.
Member Fisher votes yes, Vice President Exum,
Yes.
and President Hall.
Yes. Motion passes. Okay. Well, now moving on to our study topics. I hope my internet's not cutting out for you guys. It's kind of unstable for me. So number 10.1 is the update for remote learning review, also by Dr. Norton, for the process and actions taken during the remote learning period during the pandemic. So I will leave it with you, Kim.
Thank you.
Do you want me to share for you, Kim?
If you can, that would be great. Thank you.
I sure can.
Good evening, everyone. The student learning team and I will be sharing an update on remote learning, and also the many supports that were in place will be the focus of our presentation for students and families.
Oops. Sorry. Oh, it's not advancing. Sorry. I've got 3 monitors and
That's okay.
trying to get to the
Like piloting an airplane.
it really is.
Yeah.
But it just advanced from my arrow, but it's not letting me do that.
Do you have a license?
Hmm?
Do you have a license for piloting?
Oh, I know. Some days it doesn't feel like it. There we go. All right, Kim.
Okay. So we had multiple formats. I'll start off by sharing some of those, stemming from Zoom conferences to learning packets at meal sites and learning stands. And Mrs. Smith will detail more about that. And we provided technology devices for our families. And I think we had about 1,600 Chromebooks that we gave out during this time. I don't think I have the Learning Link site on here. I know we visited that before, but I just want to mention that throughout this process, we focused on the whole child. So when we visit that site, you'll see all the schools, if you recall, and all the academic areas, but we also had information for social emotional support. So there were suggestions for families. It was divided up by grade level. And then another remarkable thing was just all the outreach that we had from our support staff during this time. We asked all of our principals to keep track of students that were being engaged during this process, and they measured engagement through communication with teachers or the packets that were picked up along the way. And then if we had families that our principals and teachers were not hearing from, the support staff would reach out and make those connections. And Mrs. Gibbons will also share a little bit more later, but we also had UMS that did a survey during this time, and really some of our students really needed to hear from the staff and really reached out, and there were supports in place via phone as well. So I just want to commend our staff because they just rolled with it immediately from the very beginning. As you know, our directions, we would think we were going one way, and then we'd no sooner send out an email, and then we were given different directives. But our staff worked extremely hard, and I just want to mention that they didn't only just plan for students and connecting with students, but they still were participating in staff meetings, grade level and content collaboration, and were connected to their devices quite a bit. So we also had to remind them often and for their own self-care as well. And next, Mrs. Smith will talk about the learning packets.
Good evening. First, I wanted to start off by saying on March 27th, ISB provided all of our districts in the state of Illinois with guidance on how to proceed with remote learning. So we used 4 of our remote learning planning days to make sure that our grade level specifics were in alignment with these recommendations. The guidance that the state gave us, it was a maximum and a minimum amount of time spent on learning activities each day, ranging from pre-K all the way up to 12th grades. Our responsibility with remote learning is to provide digital and non-digital learning opportunities to all of our families pre-K to 12th grades. How learning opportunities is defined looks very different according to the grade bands. As you can see here, there are various different levels. According to ISB, we were encouraged to guide teachers to give optional work, engagement opportunities, and also enrichment opportunities, as long as it was made clear to the students and families that the work is optional and it will not negatively impact the students' grades. Any non-digital learning materials included multiple modes of representation, including diagrams, graphic organizers, large print, maps, illustrations, and etc., in order to help students and parents grasp the previous content and connect both of them to the current learning. We had directors, instructional coaches, grade level leaders, classroom teachers, teacher coordinators, everybody on board to help us assist with preparing these learning packets for pre-K 5. The pre-K looks a little different than the other grade bands. What you'll notice is that research and best practice shows that technology and screen time is not the best way for pre-K students to learn. Therefore, they provided hands-on materials and also play experiences. What you are looking at is the learning packet distribution grid, which outlines which packets were given and on what dates they were given throughout the remote learning platform. It was very important for the pre-K teachers to also spend a lot of their time talking with the families about how to help children explore within the home and using some of those play-based items that they already have. 4 of the staff members that were at early childhood wrote grants, and they received amounts of money that they were able to purchase games and also learning materials to provide some individual support. For the students that transitioned from pre-K to kindergarten, we also provided them with a Get Ready to Kindergarten bag that also assisted in them with transitioning, because we could not host the in-person open houses that were held at each school in the spring. Because of COVID-19, precautionary guidelines are in place, so the learning packets that were distributed to all of our students and families could not be collected. So what we're taking into consideration as we continue to plan and learn from our experiences is, when we plan for any more future remote learning opportunities, think about ways that we can provide feedback to our students and families, and how we can also account for the work that they have done in the learning packets. That concludes my report.
Ms. Smith, can I just ask, were the learning packets mailed or hand delivered to all of these families in our district?
There was a combination of things that took place. We had all of the learning packets at all of the distribution sites. And then we wanted to expand and make sure also that students had packets available in their neighborhoods. So we also made sure every single school had learning packs. And what we also did was make sure that if parents wanted to come and get those packets on the weekend or in evenings, they were provided in the learning stands. We also had staff members that did deliver learning packets, and they put them in mailboxes or other ways of delivery. But we wanted to make sure that since we had a response that they were wanting learning packets, that we made sure that we met those needs.
Okay, thank you.
Just a quick question. Do the summer learning packets go out regardless of a pandemic? I mean, is that a regular practice for our elementary students, or was it special this year?
It's
I would
really
say that that's not a requirement. However, many teachers will take the time and create those for their students.
Right. Okay. I mean, it's wonderful. I'm glad that they did it. I just didn't know if it was a special practice, or I assumed that there was something going home. I know the high school and the middle school kids get homework, but I didn't know about the elementary kids. So, any other questions?
Next, we'll have Mrs. Truex.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Kelly Truex, Director of PD, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about what supports we offered to the staff during remote learning and this summer. So during remote learning, the IT department offered virtual office hours for Google Classroom, Slides, Tech Hub, and any additional remote learning resources. They're also offering summer PD, 3 classes for summer PD that people can sign up for with Google Classroom and the Tech Hub. We had EdWeb webinars were available to staff. 197 webinars have been attended by the staff, and there were many different topics available to support remote learning. We created a PD pipeline, which is a virtual newsletter, and that provides spring and summer professional development opportunities. They will all be virtual this summer, and they were all virtual in the spring. In the spring, we had 8 different sessions that staff could choose from, ranging from social emotional learning, self-care, remote learning strategies, and resources. In the summer PD pipeline, we have 20 different sessions, topics ranging from literacy and math boot camp, classroom management, technology, like I mentioned before, differentiated instruction. We have both in-district PD, and the ROE instructional coaches are providing some PD for differentiated instruction for when we return, and making sure that kids, we can close that gap. Handwriting without tears curriculum, dual language and English language learners PD, reflection on your teaching environment, assessment toolkit, family engagement, class tag online tool for reaching families. That was something that was successful during remote learning, so we're offering a class for that now in case we do go back to remote learning, and developing a community resource binder. Dr. Ivory Tatum shared with us an SEL opportunity from Mindful Practices, which included 30 hours of SEL strategies and best practices to be used when we return for the transition back to school. Urbana registered approximately 75 staff members. They are attending this training this summer. So I'm really looking forward to seeing those activities when we come back and transition back. So there are a lot of opportunities for professional development. We did put a staff survey out to see with remote learning and what they might need, and that will be due June 5th. I have been looking at some of the responses, and family engagement is a big one right now, and just remote learning, how to make it rigorous and things like that. So we will be continuing the support to the staff.
Okay, next we'll have Mrs. Gibbons. Do we still have Linda with us?
Oh, I can't tell because I'm sharing. You want me to stop sharing? You see?
I'm with you.
Oh,
I
there she is.
really forgot to unmute myself, and I apologize. Bear with me here. Oh boy. Okay, so this evening I'm going to speak with you about some of the social and emotional support that we've provided to our staff and students during remote learning. So our community experts, Elaine Spungen and Karen Sims, have continued to support our staff via webinar and Zoom meetings. Elaine offered a series of webinars focusing on building your support systems during this time, very stressful time, away from students, away from the school. And Elaine also joined one of our cabinet meetings early on to discuss similar topics for administration. Karen Sims offered 6 Zoom meetings for staff called Coping Through COVID. So both were a way of providing extra support to our staff. Thanks to both of them too. They're both wonderful to work with. So another community partner that continued providing services to our middle school students was Hope Springs. And you might remember a little over a year ago, we formed a memorandum of understanding with Hope Springs to provide counseling services to Urbana middle school students. These services have continued remotely for students during our time out of school. The district clinical professionals, student engagement advocates, student interventionists, and more of our support staff have also checked in with our students during this time by making phone calls, Zoom meetings. And finally, I wanted to mention, as Kim mentioned earlier, that Urbana Middle School conducted a survey with their students and asked about their experiences since they've been out of school. And they had a response of about 252 students. 20 of those students replied within the first week of the survey and requested that a staff member contact them to talk. And those 20 students, of course, excuse me, were contacted by the staff member of their choice. Some of the themes of the responses from the students were, they wanted to know, of course, when they were coming back. When do we get to come back to school? Many of them mentioned being anxious about the future, what the future would hold for them. But overall, the report indicated that students are generally feeling okay to great, but they are in need of human interaction. They're missing some of the contact they've had with their peers and friends over this time away. So that's all I have to report on. If anybody has questions, please feel free.
Okay, Mrs. Webster.
Oh, could I just ask, did we do a similar survey with the Urbana High School students? I mean, that was interesting to read the survey results.
So I think it was their social worker who led that. They have a fairly tight team at the middle school, and I think she is the one, and her support team led that. I have not heard of anything at the high school level at this point. I know they are really focusing on social and emotional learning though, and that may be something that they will introduce before we're back to school.
Yeah, just seems like a good idea to check in with students, see how they're doing. Obviously, the middle school students had a lot to say.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'll have to say, Peggy, the high school did do a really good job with connecting and using their support staff. But yeah, as Linda mentioned, they just didn't do a survey.
Oh. Thank you.
Has anyone checked in with the parents to see how they're handling this?
Yeah, and we'll detail that a little bit more, Brenda, but we did have a survey, and as Kelly mentioned, we surveyed staff and we surveyed families, and those are due to be back June 5th. And it was just to hear back from our staff and our families about their overall experience with remote learning. And then based on that feedback that we receive, that'll help us plan as we move forward.
Okay, hopefully we might be getting more information also from the Illinois State Board of Education on how this is going to continue, especially as far as grades and moving children from one grade up to the next grade or holding them back if needed. And, you know, there's a lot of gray areas as far as that.
And we've had that question, you know, some of our parents have asked, but it's definitely going to be a much different start than we've ever had. And so how we would traditionally start and the starting point, it'll look much differently. And we'll talk a little bit more, but our focus will definitely be more, especially elementary literacy and math.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the amount of support that we've offered to the families is outlined here on this slide. One of the things that we did was supply school supply bundles to families, and we sent that out in a variety of ways. We used email, Facebook, and principals also contacted parents to let them know that the school supply bundles were available. The bundles had paper, pencils, pens, rulers, colored pencils, a variety of things in them. They came pre-packaged. In addition to the bundles, we also passed out school supplies on 2 different occasions with just the basics of pencils, spiral notebooks that were donated, colored pencils, crayons, etc. We really tried to make sure that students had the basics. We knew we couldn't provide all of the supplies that students needed at home, but we tried to at least make sure that all students who needed them had those supplies at home. We had the learning packets and the learning stands that Mrs. Smith discussed. We provided Chromebooks to families, and we did send that information out to families electronically, and they received personal phone calls asking what type of technology they needed. We provided Wi-Fi through the University of Illinois, food distribution for students at our food distribution sites, also grocery and household essentials distribution. Stone Creek was very helpful in that, and also household essentials that were donated from other organizations, which I'll talk about in just a moment. And we also produced 2 family-focused newsletters. This is something that I do regularly twice a year for families. But during this time, we really got the sense that families needed a little bit extra. I work closely with our district family liaisons and our building level family liaisons and social workers and Ms. Gibbons. And they were all giving me information of things that families needed. So I did 2 electronic editions, created 2 electronic editions of the Family Focus. One was the COVID-19 edition with information about COVID-19 when our school closures began. And then the other one was a special self-care edition. Ms. Norton, are you able to click on that so that we could show a highlight?
Which one, Dion? The COVID one?
The self-care, please.
The self-care one, okay.
Just to give you an idea of what it was, because what we were hearing was that families were overwhelmed of providing homeschool services, of trying to support their children with their basic needs of going to work, and some people working in the home. So it was simply just a newsletter to give parents some ideas and families ideas of things that they can do for themselves. So if you have time, if we can't get to the link now, that's okay. You can look at it at another time. But we did email that out to all families and also made that available on the Urbana Family Facebook engagement page as well. So those are always linkable that you can go back to and families can go back to at any time. And the bonus of the self-care edition was that I sent an email to the entire district staff and asked them to contribute videos to the self-care edition. So there are teachers talking about recipes you can make at home, exercises, meditation, enjoying time outside. Some of our staff members, there it is. Some of our staff members that are musically talented sang a song on the video. So we tried to make it personal from our staff to the family so that it wasn't just a YouTube video with strangers. They were videos with faces that people recognized and respected. Thank you for sharing that.
No problem. I'm going to go back to PowerPoint here.
So Dion, while she's working on that,
Uh-huh.
I thought it was, I don't know if this was able to materialize, but you mentioned Wi-Fi through the U of I. And I seem to recall a couple of months ago that we were using some of our COVID money to outfit our school buses as Wi-Fi hotspots and then parking the school buses in various neighborhoods. Did that work?
So I'm going to let MC, that was the plan, John, but since MC happens to be on the call, I'm going to let him we did not get an opportunity to do that. It was all kinds of equipment and technical issues. So MC, I'll let you kind of answer that question since you're here.
Hello all. That was it exactly. We just ran into a multitude of issues, namely supply issues. When we got ready to order the equipment, there were a lot of delays because a lot of other school districts were trying to do the same thing. And by the time we got the equipment in and were able to coordinate with First Student, it was pretty close to the end of the school year. So we still have the equipment in hand. It was not that much of it wasn't that large of a expenditure. So we do have that available. And if needed, as of the fall, we'll quickly be able to turn around and get everything installed on the First Student buses and be able to deploy those in addition to the U of I buses.
Good, because I thought that was just a real creative idea. And I mentioned it to a few people who thought, wow, they wish they had thought of something like that. So I hope we can, well, it'd be great if we're all in school next year and we don't have to use it, but it's good to know that it's there.
Okay, we'll have Dion continue on the next slide.
So the next slide is that we want to give thanks to our community partners. And I definitely want to, before we go through the list, I want to make sure that you know that this is not an exhaustive list. We try to think as many as possible, but anyone that is watching, community members, families, people who called and volunteered and just offered moral support or donated supplies, this is just the general large list, but we were very fortunate to have several people as soon as the school closure started, calling and emailing and asking, what can I do? So these are the ones that we could remember of: Stone Creek Church, Feeding Our Kids, Arbor, First Student, CU Church, the United Way, WILL PBIS, the Principal Scholars Program, CU Better Together, CU Foundation, Urbana Free Library, Care for You, and Conflict 180 are some of the main partners that we remember. But again, these are just a few of them, but we greatly appreciate all of the community support that we got to be able to support our students and families and each other with the generous donations that we received. We also received donations, I just remembered, I apologize, from Office Depot. Office Depot sent us boxes of materials that included jump drives, school supplies, materials, water bottles, etc. And we immediately got those distributed to our students in need. And I used our family liaisons to tell me which families were truly in need. And we got those materials out to those neighborhoods right away.
Can I add a couple, Dion, that I just thought of too?
Yeah.
So Staples, they were very instrumental in bringing us bags. So we use Staples bags at the meal sites. We use Staples bags when we gave out the Chromebooks, just the little plastic bags. News Gazette donated all of our learning stands. How many did they give us? One for each school, right, Kim?
They did, yes. And so we painted those orange, and then we had all of the learning resources available for our families.
Mm-hmm. And then we don't want to, I know this really wasn't for the students so much, but this Jimmy John has also kind of given donations and been instrumental in some of the things that we were able to do this spring. So for teacher appreciation as well.
And you're right, Dr. Ivory Tatum, it was Staples, not Office Depot. That, yeah, they gave the supplies. When you said, I was like, oops. But yes, and that's why we tried to list as many as we could, but we just had a wonderful amount of support, and we greatly appreciate all of our community partners for their support.
I hope thank you notes have been written.
Mm-hmm. They will be.
Okay, Mrs. Smith again.
So
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the teacher to student feedback. ISBE's guidance included that grades were to be based on the principle that there is no educational harm to any student. So what we decided to do for grades K through 8 was to provide the families with a narrative report card. The narrative report card is structured to give families feedback on the strengths of the student, but also provide next steps for improvement. The narrative report card is a summary of the first 3 quarters of the school year, because remember, the 4th quarter cannot be any harm to any student's educational record. It does not include the 4th quarter because you cannot determine a level of student engagement or completion of work through the remote learning platform that is fair for all students. The narrative report card for grades K through 5, along with their 1st through 3rd grade quarter reporting, was placed in each student's CUME files at the elementary level. Urbana Middle School used the narrative comment sections in Skyward to report on their narrative report card as well. And then the high school, they continue to use the reports of the letter grades. During this remote learning platform, all students should have the opportunity to redo, make up, or try again to complete, show progress, or attempt to complete any work assigned prior to the remote learning time. The emphasis for any work that was assigned, reviewed, or completed during this time is on learning, but not on compliance. So we've used various platforms to keep students and families engaged during this time. We've used various platforms, including emails, Class Dojo, Zoom meetings, Class Tag, Remind apps, phone calls, postcards, and yes, indeed, in person as well. Please remember, this is not an exhaustive list, but this is just a start, and we will continue to look at other ways in which we can provide feedback to our students and also our families as we continue remote learning in the future.
Ms. Smith, can I just ask, I understand the principle about, causing no educational harm, so no student's grades can go down because of the change up in the learning environment. But how about a student who needed to bring up a grade in that last quarter? Were those opportunities that, if someone needed to bring up a grade, could they do that even though we were relying on remote learning and these other structures?
Yes, they have shared, particularly at the secondary level too, because as Mrs. Smith mentioned, students were getting many opportunities to redo and provided with extra time. In fact, the last couple weeks, that was what that time was for. And so we did communicate with the principals, and they did share that they had many students that did in fact bring up their grades.
Okay. And just a general question, whenever a parent has a question about their students' grades, whether we're during this remote learning time or any other time, are they instructed to talk to their student's teacher first and then the building principal second? Is that still the proper?
Correct. The teacher knows best, has had that interaction with the student. We always recommend that families reach out to teachers first, and if they're unsatisfied, then they can definitely follow up with the building principal.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next, Mrs. Ricconi.
Good evening. I'm going to talk a little bit about engagement and when we talk about student and family engagement, what that looked like during this remote learning time. So typically when we talk about engagement, we're really talking about the level of which students connected with the material and the content, and how they then use that connection to continue to build motivation to continue learning within this process. As Ms. Norton mentioned at the beginning, we did surveys, or we collected information with the building principals, where teachers were reporting the amount of engagement that was happening with their students, and district-wide, the average for student engagement during this time was at 82%. So what that looked like for each individual child and family did vary. So some examples of what that looked like was are listed below, and I'll go through those. So for example, completion of learning tasks. At the elementary level, as you've heard, we did not collect the packets back. We did distribute them. But if at the middle school and secondary level, if teachers were giving out assignments, either through Google Classroom or through other platforms, and students were working on them, that was considered student engagement. Teachers were holding Zoom meetings regularly with their classrooms for some teachers, as well as some teachers were even holding regular parent connection meetings. One teacher had mentioned how she was doing like a family trivia night, even just to kind of keep up with some of those social family interactions with her students and families during this time. Continuing conversations with teachers and families about learning. So when teachers would, call and make connections, and just frequent check-ins. The wellness checks were done some by teachers, but especially by our social work staff and parent liaisons. And that could have been a phone call, it could have been via text, but sometimes it was even using, the social distancing guidelines, and even making stops at home still and making sure, that everything was okay. If a family needed something, we tried to provide whatever they needed at the time. Individual education plan meetings continued as planned throughout this time. They were done remotely. So that could have been over the phone, that could have been through Zoom. So doing that, if you've ever sat in an IEP meeting, sometimes that can be a lot of people. So having a lot of people on a Zoom meeting for that, we definitely continued with that during this process. As well as transition meetings. So this could have been transition meetings for children that are moving from early childhood to elementary, or from elementary to middle, or from middle to high school. So these are meetings that, are very critical in the learning for students. So we wanted to make sure that we continued with those meetings, so that way we didn't have any steps missed, during that transition period.
So if I could ask, 82% is a lot higher percentage than what I had earlier heard that we were reaching. Maybe that's district-wide, so maybe the number is a little different at the high school. What I'd heard at the high school was a lower number than that. And I know you're moving on to the next slides about lessons learned, and I hope that the state is listening carefully, and that the steps that we've been forced to take through remote learning, I'm fearful, is causing lifelong damages to students, and some of the times it's to students that are most in need of being at school. So I'm thrilled if we've reached 82%, as opposed to the earlier number that I'd heard, which was closer to 60%. But that's still 18% short of 100. So we've got, that means that, almost 1/5 of our students have not been involved in school since March. So I appreciate Kim's earlier remarks about the start of school next year is going to look very different, because we potentially got 20% of our children that we're going to have to bring back to speed. So I look forward to lessons learned, and maybe even if there's a complete pandemic situation again, that we pursue opportunities where we hopefully we won't be locked down quite as much as we are, and hopefully there'll be some time somewhere along the line to be able to reach out to these 20% children that are missing, and somehow get them re-engaged.
I can tell. Peggy, are you trying to make a comment? You're muted still, Peggy.
I know, there we go.
There you go.
I just wanted to quickly follow up on what John just said. 82% is an encouraging number, but did we do, what steps did we take for the 18% who we acknowledged were not engaged? Were there extra efforts made to reach out to those families or those students?
Absolutely. Teachers, student support at the schools, many different avenues that were attempted. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So one more question. Is there anything that we could do in terms of our resource allocation to give you additional resources to reach out to those 18%? I just, if we're forced to continue this, what can we do to bring that number up?
So in our next presentation, when we go over the CARES Act, we will tell a little bit more about that, but that's the purpose of the CARES Act money. So as we're recovering from the pandemic and as we put some things in place, then we know there are things that we've learned from this. We had no idea when this all started. We never would have dreamt this, nor did we know that this would go on for so long. But now we've really been able to reflect upon this and think about some other supports that we could put in place and some things we can do differently. Okay, and Mrs. Webster, one more time.
Okay, there you go. So in terms of lessons learned in the Curriculum Instruction and Assessment Department, as well as Superintendent's Council, we spent a lot of time thinking about and discussing a lot of the questions that you've asked tonight of what could we do differently. If this continues, how can we support all of our students and families? One of the things that we heard a lot from families was the importance of streamlining Zoom meetings across academic grade levels and buildings. The issue that was happening in a lot of households were elementary would have Zoom meetings set the same time that middle school and high school had it set. And even households that may have had more than one electronic device still had difficulty with internet access. If you have 3 and 4 and 5, and if you have an adult working from home, all of that streaming was causing a toll on some of our families' internet service. Some families expanded their service. Other families were able to afford additional devices, but we want to be mindful and equitable of all of our families' needs. So one thing that we will do, should we have to continue remote learning in the fall, is to work with the schools to possibly have elementary have Zoom meetings on Mondays and Wednesdays, middle school Tuesdays and Thursdays, high schools we'll mix it up. But that's something that we're definitely looking at, just to make sure that we're not putting more on our students and families, because quite a few of our families wanted to participate in each of their children's Zoom meetings so that they could support the learning after the meeting. But if they're all going on at the same time, that's something that we learned, and we appreciated that feedback that we received from families. We also want to make sure that we connect with staff ongoing and very often. We try to have as many meetings as possible with staff members. We encourage principals to have weekly meetings, to send weekly updates, because just as our families and students were going through hard times and experiencing trauma as a result of COVID-19, quite a few of our staff members were having issues as well of being teachers and homeschool teachers and a variety of other things. So we want to make sure that we're connecting with our staff as often as possible to make sure that they are okay, first of all, emotionally, and then second of all, that they have the academic support that they need to be able to support themselves first and then their students. We also want to make sure that we're providing ongoing professional development for teachers and staff for successful student and family engagement. We try very hard to encourage family engagement throughout the year as much as possible, but we also realize that during this time how important family engagement is, and kind of like I believe Peggy asked the question of what did we do for the other 18%, of trying to find ways to reach out to those other families of the 18% of what do you need to be able to be engaged, what are we missing, what support do you need. And we did find out that some of our families, some of our students are being raised by grandparents who are not technologically savvy. So we were able to get them the support that they needed to be able to log into Zoom. Some parents had no idea what the Chromebooks were, how to log in. So we want to make sure that we're providing that ongoing professional development for everyone involved, because this was different. It was brand new. It wasn't something that we've done before. It was not something that we could prepare for. We learned as we went. We also want to stress the importance of social emotional learning and support. As Ms. Norton said, we had quite a few staff members participate in social emotional learning certification this summer, but we want to make sure that we're able to support everyone's social and emotional needs, from students, staff, families, etc., first and foremost, and then we'll focus on learning to make sure that everyone is getting what they need. Another thing that we learned that was very important was the importance of time management, personal and professional, to prioritize daily tasks. Because what some of us learned at the administration level is that working from home or working remotely, a normal 8 to 9 hour day could end up at 10 and 12 if you don't prioritize your time. You start working on a task and you lose focus of, it's been 12 hours that I haven't gotten up. But the same thing also for teachers, because a lot of our teachers were really focused on that 18% of students that weren't engaged, and they were calling and they were emailing, and they were beating themselves up about they couldn't get these people connected, of those students that they were really trying to reach. But we have to focus on time management of both professional and personal for everyone. So we want to make sure that that is something that we stress for our staff and our families and our students. We want to plan for the unknown and the need to be flexible. We had to be extremely flexible throughout this entire time, because as it was mentioned earlier, we would create a plan and then we would get different guidance from the state and we'd have to change that plan. Or we'd come up with an idea and then we were told, oh, you can't do that. So instead of getting frustrated, what we would just do is come together and say, okay, well, this didn't work. Let's do something else and come back to the table. But it took a lot of flexibility. There were some times of frustration, but in the best interest of our students, we did what needed to be done. But that was one of the main lessons learned of the importance of flexibility, because this was unknown for everyone involved. And finally, ongoing partnerships with families to enhance family engagement. Our families that are normally engaged, that normally come to the Family Advisory Committee meetings that I sponsor or attend PTA or at school events, those are the families that were emailing, asking questions, because they already have those partnerships and relationships with their school building, with their principal, with their teachers. But we want to make sure that we're working with our teachers to enhance family engagement with all families, not just the families that you regularly hear from, but what does that look like? And how do you reach out to all families? How do you make all families feel comfortable enough to email you and say, hey, I've never seen a Chromebook in my life. I have no idea what I'm doing, or I really don't understand this math problem that my student has. Can you help me with that? So we want to continue to stress the importance of family engagement and partnerships throughout our school year. If we start remotely, we want to start out with a bang at the beginning of the year. What does that mean of establishing relationships with families remotely? If we are able to go back into the school building, we still want to make sure that we are creating partnerships and comfortable, safe environments where our families feel welcome and comfortable coming in.
Thank you, Mrs. Webster.
Okay.
Dion?
Yes, John?
Thanks. One of the, maybe an unintended but positive coincidence, a positive instance out of this, I've heard of reverse classrooms whereby homework is done during the day with the teacher present, and this mostly at secondary level. And the lecture format is delivered electronically, and the student takes part in that during the off school hours. I'm hoping that some of our teachers that maybe have uncomfortably gotten used to electronic teaching maybe now can, maybe we can support them as some people might wish to experiment with that concept of reverse classrooms.
That's something
might be a hidden benefit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, as we mentioned, we're really looking forward to getting the feedback from our parent and staff surveys. We want to see if it was connectivity issues, other things that we can do to problem solve. Good news is our families still have, unless it was a senior that returned a device, we did keep Chromebooks in the hands of our families that received those. So those are still available. And then we just want to continue to work to get all of our families connected. So we're really anxious to get the feedback from those surveys. We have a remote learning committee that's been established, and it'll be working on curriculum instruction, looking at the focus and aligning that to our school improvement plans. And then we'll also have a logistical committee that will focus on the sanitation and having our buildings ready for our return. And as we're all patiently waiting for guidance from ISB and the Champaign-Urbana Public Health Department, we had the pleasure of listening to Dr. Ayala last Friday, and she did mention that remote planning or remote learning 2.0 would be available about the 3rd week of June. So we are expecting more information. But at this time, what we're really trying to do, because we just don't know exactly what to expect, but what we can do is just think about what things we believe will be possible. And we just are making plans to already put those things in place, whether it's ordering all of the materials for sanitation and PPE, to just making sure that we're prepared for that transition. So we're considering all different options at this point. On May 29th, we did hold our School Improvement Planning Day remotely, and the team did a fabulous job with that, by the way. But we're working on the 4 goals, and that's going to be consistent among all of our buildings. And their school improvement goals will be focused, their SMART goals will be focused on literacy, math, SEL, and equity. So we're really excited. That'll be those plans, as we share with you before. The beautiful thing about them is they're a working document, a living, breathable working document that we just constantly are reviewing the data and sharing that at meetings. And it's not something that we put in a file and it's tucked away. Especially now, we know that we have to continue to monitor those goals. And much of our data, we receive data, until March 13th, but we'll have to reassess when we return to see where our students are at, and then plan from there. Any questions?
Kim, will you be able to share the feedback from the staff and family surveys, after you get them compiled after June 5th? I mean, I know, okay, I know we have a big agenda item, but it'd be really good for us to see what you're hearing in some form.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions from anyone? I for one am grateful about the webinars and things that have been offered to staff and families, and I've taken part in some of them. I sat in on one of Elaine Spungen's connections, which was just really, it was nice, but it also made me feel like I had to do some homework because she expected us to really dig deep into our feelings about everything. And but it was good. It was a good way to connect with people. And I'm just glad that we've hit the ground running, it seems like, with all of our plans as much as we're possibly able to. And I was sorry too to hear about the bus not working for the Wi-Fi, but we've set ourselves up so well for this fall. If we have to return to the same sort of learning environment, we've got this whole summer and so many people working on this that it gives me hope to think that we'll have a really good solid plan in place based on what we've just been learning as we're going along. I'm thank you so much to everybody for answering so many questions that I'm sure all of us have had, and I haven't been trying to ask individual questions because I just want to leave you guys alone and let you do your work. But this has been helpful to so many people and lots of parents and students who are asking the same things. So thank you again very much for all of your work. Moving on. I don't know if you guys can hear me. I'm not hearing anything here, so.
Yeah, we can hear.
Yes, you can. Okay. All of a sudden, my thing said it was muted. I am going to go back to the agenda here, and I think we have, I'm sorry, I closed out of it when I was looking at other documentation, so let me just pull it back up again. I believe our next presentation is going to be, oh my goodness.
Online registration.
Thank you, MC. Yep. I finally got the document up. Thank you very much. Yes, MC is going to be talking to us next about online registration for this summer.
All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
All right. See head nods. Good stuff. Hello again. Going to provide a quick update regarding online registration. As some of you may be aware, this is a topic that's been discussed for a number of years, even before I came on board. And there have always been some sticking points leading us to stay with our in-person centralized registration setup. But Even with this, we have continued discussions around online registration, but with the current climate, this has sort of been brought back to the forefront of conversations, and we are moving forward with pushing through, even with some of the aforementioned sticking points. Why online registration? The first is convenience for our families. With centralized registration, we have 2 days where families can come in person to complete their paperwork, and it can be inconvenient for some to get freed up during those days and times. At peak times, there are very long lines. If they have little ones, they may also be trying to wrangle the kids and so on. With online registration, we are shooting for a window spread across a few weeks. So even if parents are just swamped and busy one particular week, that won't be an issue. Additionally, with it being online, they are able to work on it at any time. So whether it is 3 in the afternoon, 3 in the morning, they'll be able to complete registration. All in all, we'll just be empowering guardians to complete this on their schedule from the comfort of their home. Second is a lessened workload for staff. And this is excluding the work that is done in preparation for centralized registration and the work that is being done on those actual days. Once centralized registration is done, when the secretaries get back to their schools, they have stacks and stacks of paperwork that they must go through, typing in all of the information from the forms into Skyward. So online registration will free them up from this data entry. Third, it is green. We use a lot of paper for centralized registration. That is the official statistical term, a lot. But seriously, I try to get an estimate of the amount of paper we use every year prior to this evening, and I couldn't, but we use a lot of paper, and so online registration is going to eliminate all of the paper forms that are normally printed out, and of course save us money on printing cost. Fourth, with everything going on surrounding COVID-19, we are putting a priority on limiting in-person contact, and online registration will allow us to do just that. And I went back and forth with including a 5th bullet point, and that is accuracy. Some districts have mentioned that online registration results in more accurate records, as there are no issues of staff incorrectly interpreting the parent's handwriting or transposing phone numbers that are written down, things of that nature. So there's a potential to have more accurate record keeping as well. As we started thinking about online registration, we wanted to ensure that we had all needed data to make informed decisions. As such, we've been heavily in communication mode, constant email threads, Zoom meetings, etc. Externally, we've been in contact with Skyward, as well as other public school districts that are using, that are Skyward schools that are using online registration. Internally, we wanted to make sure that all stakeholders had a seat at the table, so to speak. We have included staff from the technology department, the business office, staff that deal with registration, administrators, and of course, our building secretaries. Being as transparent as possible, even with all of the conversations we've had and the data we've collected, we are aware that this rollout is atypical. With this being our first year, in ideal situations, we would probably do a slow rollout to one school and have them beta test. So we can tweak and adjust things as needed before rolling out on a larger scale to the entire district. So although our aim, of course, is to have everything run as smoothly as possible, realistically, we are aware that there may be some bumps in the road, but we are hoping that those are as minimal as possible. Online registration is a module within Skyward. It is accessed through the Family Access Center. So this will be familiar for all of our families. This is only for returning students. Skyward actually has 2 products. One is called Online Registration for returning students, and the other is called online enrollment for students new to the district. What we are working on is online registration for our returning students, but we are having conversations about whether or not we want to implement online enrollment in the future. There is a integrated information review process. So that means that this won't be a situation where guardians can type in any information and that will get uploaded to the student's record. Any submissions that guardians make will have to be reviewed by staff before any changes are made within Skyward. And also it is customizable. We can tailor online registration in a multitude of ways, and I will get into that on the next slide. So when parents access online registration, they will be presented with what Skyward refers to as steps. As things stand, most students will have 5 steps they must complete for registration. The first step will be verifying student information, and this includes family information. So if the family has moved, within this step, the new address can be entered. If emergency contacts have changed, they can make that change there. If the child has a new doctor, a new allergy, all of that information can be entered in this step. The next step will be verifying Skylert information. We use School Messenger, what we refer to as Skylert, to communicate with our families. And with this step, families will be able to confirm that we have the correct email address and phone number to make sure that our communication is indeed getting to them. The third step is reviewing and acknowledging documentation. An example is acceptable use policy. With this, the documentation will be displayed, and there will be sections for both the guardian and the student to sign off. There'll be a box for them to type their name in. Sign off acknowledging that they have received and reviewed the documentation. So going back to what I was speaking about in regards to being able to customize online registration, we have what we call a SMART form that is used at the elementary schools, but the middle school and high schools don't use it. So with online registration, we're able to customize it so on a per school basis, so that the elementary schools would have that SMART form included within this step, but our middle school and high school students wouldn't. The fourth step is the photo consent, and guardians would grant permission for their child to be photographed or decline it. The fifth step is uploading proof of residency. And in this step, a guardian will be able to take a picture of their mortgage or their current lease, current utility bill, and upload that. And the sixth step is uploading health information. And I have 2 asterisks here. The first has to do with COVID-19. With the current environment, we don't know if there is going to be a requirement for this information, as a lot of time has been lost for parents to be able to get physicals and get vision exams. And we realize that as the state is opening up, doctors' offices are going to be flooded. So it may not be feasible for all of our families to be able to get these exams completed in time. So this may not make it into this year's upcoming registration, but it will be a step in subsequent years. And the second asterisk, again, has to do with that customization piece that I mentioned before. We only need health exam information for certain grades. And with online registration, in addition to being able to configure steps on a per school basis, we can configure them on a per grade basis as well. So this step would only be displayed for the appropriate grades that require health exams, which I believe are kindergarten, 6th grade, and 9th grade. So those grade levels would see this as a step. But if there was a student, for example, in 7th grade, this step wouldn't be required or even displayed, as the guardian is conducting online registration for that student. So again, with this, we could have as few as 5 steps required for registration. We have been making progress with getting a lot of things set up. I would say we are probably 85% done with getting everything created on the back end. Unfortunately, Skyward does not allow us to preview what the families will see. And so we actually have to open up online registration and actually log in as a guardian to make sure things are looking as they should. And it seems almost every passing day we are discovering additional tasks that need to be completed before we're able to open that up for a family. So we're chipping away at things. We hope to be able to view things as guardians towards the end of this week, and then we can make any final adjustments. Since we can't preview things currently, I borrowed some screenshots that another district had and blurred out some information. But what you see here is what the guardian would see as they log into the Family Access Center once we turn online registration on. At the very top of the page, front and center, there will be a button for online registration. And once they click on that, they will receive a message of our choosing. And at the bottom will be the name of all of their children. This is something that will need to be completed on for every student within the family. And after clicking on the student's name, they will be taken to online registration for the student. The landing page will display the same message that they saw on the last screen. And to the right will be the different steps for them to walk through. I know I mentioned we can have as few as 5 steps, but some of the steps will have sub-steps. So verifying student information will contain the most. The other steps will likely have no sub-steps at all. It'll just be 1 step, or there may be 2 sub-steps at the most. As they complete the steps, they are able to click on to the next step until they run through all of them and complete them, or they're also able to save their progress and come back later. So if a guardian has made their way to step 3 of 5 and something comes up and they have to get off the computer, they're able to come back and continue right where they left off. After submission, the guardian will receive confirmation that they have successfully completed online registration for their child. And at any time, they are able to go back to Family Access Center and click on online registration. So if I go back to the previous slide, this screenshot here is actually for a student who the guardian has already completed online registration, and you can see right down here. So this would be the student's name and the school year, and then here at the bottom, it will show whether online registration has been completed for them or not. After submission, as I mentioned, the guardians will receive confirmation. The building secretaries will also receive notification that there has been a new submission. Another family has completed online registration. At that point, the building secretaries will conduct that informational review and make sure that all of the input that the guardians have provided is correct. And once that is confirmed and accepted by the building secretary, they simply click an approved button, and all of that information is immediately updated into the student's record. Regarding support for online registration, we will have videos for guardians set up, and the videos will provide information about the process. It will show them where to go to get started. It will walk them through all of the steps. We will also have a separate video for any guardians who may need assistance demonstrating how to upload the pictures needed for residence verification and health exam forms, how to upload those, get them from their device to online registration. So we'll have videos both for Android and iOS. We will have phone and email support for guardians who need assistance, have any questions about the process or getting stuck at any particular step, etc. And we will, of course, have training for our building secretaries covering what needs to be handled on their end, what needs to be done on the back end. Just a bit of additional information. We will have forms available in English, Spanish, and French, but we are hoping to come up with a solution using Google Translate for everything that will translate automatically within the browser. We are still working on that. For families who are unable to proceed with online registration for whatever reason, there will be an option for these returning families to come on site and register during the same days that we will be registering our new families, which I believe is July 28th and 29th. For these families, the registration will still be done online. It will still be conducted via online registration, but they will be able to come on site. There will be some laptops, Chromebooks set up for them. They'll be able to sit down, get on those devices, and there'll be staff available to help them through each of the steps. And we are currently investigating the feasibility of families being able to pay registration fees during this process. It is a function of the online registration module, but doing so will require us to shift some of our current procedures and practices. And we'll just need to spend a bit more time investigating what that looks like and if the pros outweigh the cons. Ultimately, we're very excited for this new process. Again, we do anticipate some small bumps in the road, but we'll adjust as needed. And as time goes on and we make those improvement changes and we eventually migrate to Skyward's newer system, Cumulative, that has an even better online registration system, I know that we will not look back. That was all I had. With that, are there any questions?
I'm so happy to have this coming. I did just have a couple questions. Are all of the schools currently using Skyward?
Yes, ma'am.
They do, okay. And I know there's quite a few parents that don't use Skyward for whatever reason. What's the plan for getting the logon information to families? I don't think I heard anything about those that don't actively use it. How, I mean, is it going to be something mailed to them with information in their login, or how will that work?
Great question. So the plan presently for that will be sending out communication district-wide for everything related to online registration, and included in that will be information for families who do not have access to Family Access Center, haven't set it up, have forgotten their password, things of that nature. And the plan right now is for families who do not have that set up to either call in or email using one of those support options we mentioned previously. Historically, we have required the parents or guardians to come in person and provide ID so we can know who they are before we give them access. But right now the plan is just to verify some personal identifying information over the phone, verify who they are, get them added to Family Access Center. And once we do that on our end, they'll get an email from Skyward that will walk them through everything.
Okay, thanks.
I'm also really thankful that we're doing this, but I was wondering, one of the things that does happen during centralized registration is there's opportunities for student organizations and PTAs and the like to do recruiting. Are we going to do some sort of a mailing? How is that piece going to be fleshed out, if possible? Is that being considered?
I don't know. I thought.
No.
Oh, you okay? All right.
You want me to, okay, yes. No, we've not talked about that, Paul. I think right now we're just trying to come up with a plan, and keeping in mind, we probably won't be able to have those groups this year. You know, as we enter into phase 4, we will only be allowed to have 50 people. So the plan right now is to have our focus be on new families those 2 days. And then, of course, like MC said, families that are having technical difficulties or who need additional support with the online registration process. But even for the new families that come through on the 28th and 29th, you know, we'll only be allowed to have 50 people in the gym. We're going to use the gym and, you know, have tables and spread everybody out. So I think this year it will look really differently than it has in the past. We won't be able to have maybe, ASCCP and, all those groups that, First Student and Arbor and, we're going to be very limited in the number of people we can have in those spaces. So we might have to have one person, from First Student and one person, maybe Sandy Davin is the only person who comes. But our focus is going to be to get as many of those new families in as we can, socially distance, of course, during those 2 days. But yeah, I think this year will be kind of an anomaly, but it will be something that we'll have to consider moving forward, how we can get some of that information out to families. So I like the idea of the mail-ins. If you guys have other suggestions, maybe we can send links or, emails or I think most importantly, we want our new families to make those connections because they're coming to the district and they don't know anything about us. But I think there are ways we could get that information to returning families, via email on our website and things like that. Good. We need to add that to our list, team. For sure.
And I just have a clarifying question. I know MC, you talked about doing a slow rollout with one school, but that is just how you're rolling it out. We will have online registration for all schools district-wide.
Yes, ma'am. Apologies if I misspoke. What I was trying to say was in ideal situation, we would do a slower rollout where we would have it set up just in one school and then sort of use them as the guinea pig, so to speak, and then roll that out to the district as a whole. But right now we are having to move forward district-wide. So it will be available to all schools, yes.
So Peggy, that was our initial plan. I mean, we've been talking about when do we start this conversation, maybe October, November-ish. And our original plan was we were going to just target one elementary and maybe the middle school just to get our feet wet and get into the process. But then COVID happened and, and changed the way we're going to be allowed to do centralized registration anyway. So it's kind of forcing us to move a little faster than we expected. But so, I'm appreciating that people are flexible with us and give us a lot of grace because as MC said, there are going to be lots of bumps and challenges. Because we would have preferred to do this, one or two schools at a time and then tweak things for the following year. But we are not going to have that luxury this year to do it that way. So.
Makes sense. Thank you.
I don't know if I hope I did saying this, but what about the families who they register late? We always have latecomers, right at the beginning of the school year, or people have moved or whatever. Will they also be able to register online, or will they do it the old fashioned way and have to go to the actual building and get the paperwork?
Are you referring to returning students or?
Well, both actually. I mean, there's always some kids who might move here from Champaign for, whatever reason with their families, or they might move in a different neighborhood. So they exist in the district, but they're going to a different school. I just know that in times past when we've missed registering in person, we missed that deadline. We were supposed to go to our students' building and get the paperwork from the secretary. So I don't know how will it work for anybody who's late to that process.
I will admit I am not sure. A student who has left the district and comes back, I'm not sure if we consider them a new student per se, but for any students that are new to the district, we would follow the same procedure we've been doing for years, where they'll have to fill out hard copies of all the documentation. If it is what we would deem a returning family, once they are ready to register, we can provide that information to them, or they can still come into the building. But again, even if they come into the building, we would just be getting them on a device and having them go through the online registration electronically.
Thank you. Any other questions from board members?
Yeah, I'm just now coming up with one. And the term is that actually left my mind. What would possibly happen for a family registering who wants to have a child in the elementary level attend a school outside of their attendance area?
Petitioning.
Oh gosh, such an easy word.
I am not sure. Anyone else able to?
So petitioners follow a little different process anyway. We have a petitioning deadline, and petition deadline is typically the last day of registration. So they would still fill out the paperwork. All that paperwork is still online, but we always have petitioners still register at their home school, because petitioning is a year-to-year approval. Just because you petition one year, you don't automatically get to go back there the next year. So Ms. Norton handles that. And again, those students would be, it's always based on enrollment, and it's always based on need. And so they don't automatically get that benefit from year to year. So they'd still go in through the returning process, and we'd have to indicate that they were a petitioner and had filled out the petition paperwork. So we would have that kind of pulled out and discussed separately.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Oh.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. This was another informative piece of the meeting tonight. I know a lot of people always ask about it. I think as far as not having online registration, our district has got to be one of the most efficient in-person registration systems I've ever experienced in my life. And at one time I had 3 kids in the district at the same time, and you guys had me. I got to do my whole lunch hour with that, and I was amazed at how fast it was. So I have every confidence you guys will get this up and running. But I'm sorry that my own students are now finally finished. I would really be excited to be a guinea pig on testing this out, because it sounds like a really innovative approach. So thank you. Keep us posted how it's going over the summer.
Yes, ma'am, we'll do.
Thanks. Okay, next up is 10.3 on our agenda, which is to discuss the CARES Act. Again, Kim, you're going to be talking to us about what we've got in store for us with the Board of Education from the state and federal grant.
Thank you. It is now time for us to prepare our application. And May 5th, we did give an update on the CARES grant and all the allowable funds that are available through that. I won't go through everything bullet by bullet just for time's sake. And if you have questions, I'll be happy to answer them. But we did that review at the May 5th board meeting. But overall, to kind of sum it up, it's efforts between districts and other partners to develop, prevent, prepare for, and respond to the coronavirus and the learning throughout. Mrs. Webster is going to share tonight the focus and what we are preparing for our district to go over those allowable expenses. And we have divided those into several categories that we'll review with you.
Oh, unmute.
Dion, you're muted.
Muted.
And I'm just talking away. I am so sorry.
We were reading your lips, so it worked out.
Thank you. I'm just going to hit the highlights of this document, but this document addresses a lot of the questions that we've been asked this evening of how are we going to support families and students and learning? What kind of funds are we going to have? So some of the things that we are going to use and purchase with our ESSER grant funds are additional meals for students, technology for online learning between classrooms, including hardware, software, and connectivity. And that would include Wi-Fi and hotspots for families who may need that additional Wi-Fi service or having issues with connectivity in their neighborhoods. We're also going to focus on additional professional development training for staff and for families, mental health services and supports, because we do realize that our mental health needs will be increased for some of our students who have experienced intense trauma as a result of COVID-19. So we do want to make sure that we are able to hire additional staff to support the mental health services and supports for our students. That will also include adding part-time social workers, half-time social workers at our building. So we are intending on hiring possibly 3 additional social workers to split amongst the buildings, because at the elementary level, We just have one social worker who is already providing an extensive amount of support for students, but whereas the middle school and high school have social workers and guidance counselors, we want to make sure that our elementary students receive the mental health support that they need. So though that will be one of the things that we purchase with our grant funds. We also are going to need to spend an extensive amount of money for cleaning and sanitizing school buildings and throughout the district, throughout the day, every few hours, and we will follow the guidelines strictly as we are given, but that will require hiring several additional custodians to support the cleaning needs of our buildings. We have been granted $1.4 million, and I included kind of the allocation per student, the things that we're going to purchase. Of course, we'll purchase additional PPE, personal protective equipment. We do realize that they are children, just like gloves and pencils and other things. These items may be lost, so we will have a wide variety of gloves and additional things, hand sanitizer, available to keep our students safe. Thermometers, because we do realize that we will have to take temperature, so we'll purchase additional thermometers, professional development consultants, because remote learning is totally different, and we want to make sure that we have additional educational staff to support the learning gaps that have been created of our students being out of school for about 5 consecutive months. We'll purchase additional educational subscriptions. One of the things that we will purchase with the funds is Reading A to Z. That's an electronic subscription of books and reading activities online. It's not something that we purchased before due to the cost, but we did learn. Thankfully, the company gave us a free subscription during this time, and we found out how valuable it was for our students to be able to have that access to books online. We'll purchase science kits, math materials, books for students to read at home, because as we all know, all students do not have a home library at home, and we want to make sure that our students have that information, prepackaged meals, and then also support from outside agencies for mental health. So we will add additional staff within the buildings, but we also realize that we may have a need to go outside of our school buildings to provide an additional layer of support for our students and families. And we are still working on the grant and asking questions. We worked on it today, and I reached out to our principal consultant and asked some questions, and we'll continue to work on it. But this is our general overview.
And this is just a one-time funding stream from the feds, not likely to come back again.
Correct.
And it'll be retroactive back to March 13th for expenses that have been incurred due to the coronavirus.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
I'm wondering if any thought will be given to some of the new screening, remote screening tools that are coming out to make sure that as students enter the building, they're not entering the building as a COVID carrier, a contagious carrier, such as the infrared cameras that do temperature checks as students walk in, or possibly other types of testing, things that are still being researched and might be available to us in the fall.
Yeah, we
Yes.
are. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Kim. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, we are examining that and the availability. So we are looking at different models.
I actually got to see a thermal pre-screener in action today. So, I mean, that definitely something, you know, at an athletic event or as a large group of students walk in, it kind of looks like a gun, so to speak, and you just kind of wave it in front of a large group of people, and it pinpoints who from that group might have a temperature. It's considered a pre-screener, not a like identifier. So we would use it to say, you know, this person has a temperature, and they'd go see the nurse, or they'd go to a separate area where we might be not quarantining, but kind of monitoring those students as they might enter the building, or if it was a concert or a choir program or a football game or something like that. So, so yes, those are all things that we're considering, John.
I understand it's pretty expensive, but at least we're looking into it.
The handheld ones are not as bad as you know, the other one we looked at was thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, but the handheld ones, you know, even if we got one for each school, I think might be something we might be able to do with this money.
Sounds great.
Mhm.
I have a question on the sanitation and cleaning, and you mentioned every few hours or whatever. I'm just gonna put it straight out there. I'm very concerned about the type of products that we will be using. With me being an asthmatic, I wanted to make sure that we find products that are fume-free, unscented, so on and so forth. I'll share my personal experience so everybody will at home will also understand. The very first night that we had one of our board meetings, there were we were in the board room. I knew as soon as I walked in the front door that a whole lot of cleaning had been going on because the smells, the scents, the fumes were in the air. I walked in from, you know, quarantining at home, hadn't been around anybody, and within the first half hour, I was starting to cough a couple of times, which kind of didn't make sense until I really thought about it later. I was in the building from about 11:30 till 1 o'clock after we were finished, and my Chromebook was all set up for me and everything. But by then, I was not going into an asthma attack. I'm very glad that I was finally out of the building. But my side effects of having the cough, the sinus drainage through my throat, it wasn't until 7 o'clock that night when I really felt that I was back to being normal. I'm very worried about our young children who are sensitive to things like that, the asthmatics. I'm concerned about just general air circulation and so on and so forth, to move those type of scents and smells out of the rooms as quickly as we are busy cleaning. So if we could, I just want to put that out there right now. Like, I hope we haven't, you know, really delved into buying a whole lot of products or anything like that. But I want to speak out for the ones that have allergies and are super sensitive to even to perfumes, scents within, you know, even deodorant, so on and so forth. It does happen. I'm proof of it. And when I went to school, I was the only asthmatic I ever knew until I met one or two more by the time I got into high school. And now it seems like we have several within a classroom. Things have definitely changed over the decades. And I'm very, very aware. I mean, we isolate pretty much for peanut products, that type of thing. So the same thing happens with scents and fumes in the air. So if we could be mindful of that as we go forward when we're doing our cleaning and sanitation, I would really appreciate it on behalf of a lot of parents.
So Randy, you want to?
Yep. Ruth Ann, we're ESS is still continuing to use the same products that they've always used. And we are also going to use the same products that ESS used and that we've also used in the past. The only difference is that there'll be some will be applied with electrostatic sprayers. We do have a few different cleaning products that we are testing because we really want to find one that when we use the electrostatic sprayer doesn't leave a film or spot on the flat surfaces. And the way it's looking right now, we'll probably just continue to use what we have in the past, and these new products we're probably going to use like on the outside, on the playgrounds, maybe you know, somewhere where it's going to be more open area, so there shouldn't be any issues. And they're also neutral type cleaner, so not a lot of smells to them.
Okay, thank you. I also had the experience of having to go into the county clerk's office for voting also, and there was someone in there just constantly spraying Lysol all over the place, and you know, that type of thing, you know, bothered me, and I'm sure quite a few other people. So I'm really glad that, you know, we're being very mindful for all the students and staff and staff who have allergies, asthma, anything that might trigger any type of reaction. So I really appreciate that.
Any other questions for
There's more of a comment. I'm really, really ecstatic about the fact that you're allocating some of this money for additional supports for social workers at the elementary level. I think that's something that's been needed just in general. Going forward, I'd like to see it, you know, if it's possible. I know we have tons of budget constraints, and it's always a tough issue for us, but I think we're going to get a tremendous bang for our buck, increasing the level of service we provide, and just in general, not just because of COVID, for that. So anyway, so thanks for doing that.
I hope we can find them, Paul. So if you guys know people, when those postings go up, spread the word.
I mean, will they be posted as temporary positions since it's just being funded with this sort of soft grant money?
We haven't really talked about that yet. When we submit the grant, we'll see what what our grant the people that Deon work with, they may say, maybe you can't use that much. I don't know. We'll have to wait for their feedback. But those are our initial thoughts. We also wanted to add more nurses. Right now we have nurses that we share across buildings. So we want to make sure we have a nurse in every building, not being shared. And we anticipate custodial ads. I mean, Deon probably already said that, but because of the increased duty around cleaning, we don't have a person here at central office. Our person comes in from ESS and not until 4 o'clock. So, there will be guidelines that say we need somebody here that will clean. So that might mean we have to hire somebody to be here at central office and adult ed, because we don't get any cleaning support until after hours. So just those are kind of those things that we're thinking about as well in terms of, staffing.
Thank you.
And just to mention, it was really rewarding when we did our school improvement planning, and we would have loved to have had that in person, but as we were all going to different breakout groups and they were working on SMART goals, they were wanting to focus on their SEL first. And we just talked about that among our buildings. So we just feel we're really proud that they're embracing that, and that our planning teams understand the need to focus on that.
Well, thank you. That was helpful, and I'm looking forward to more updates. I wish that we could get another grant. I hope they could pass another one to come through for the start of the school year, but you'll keep us all posted, I know. Thank you very much. Okay, well, we can move on to 10.4 on the agenda, Thomas Paine Elementary Programming Report, and Riley has been sitting patiently by to present to us with our updated report. Thanks for being here, Riley.
Thanks, Team CIA. You guys don't have to stay for the rest. You can pop off if you want.
Yes, thank you too for all of you.
Guys.
Riley, unmute.
You're muted, right? Yeah.
You're still muted, Riley.
He's working on it.
It's in the lower left corner of your screen.
Jennifer, you may need be able to unmute him.
Okay, I can do that. He usually is pretty good about it. Where are you, Riley? Oh, there you are. Okay. No, it's not letting me. So lower left, there's like a microphone and a video. Like you have to remember, you have to kind of click on it and the line goes away.
You gotta kind of hover.
There you go. Thought I saw it change. Lower left in the black part at the bottom.
And you have to sort of hover over it to make those icons appear. Hover with your mouse. Hmm.
Yeah, well, what if I'm gonna try to unmute all and then you guys can all mute yourself back. Let's see if that helps. Nope.
Yeah, he's unmuted now.
Unmuted now. There we go.
Okay, there we go. So,
Hi, everybody. I had more major problems than just unmuting.
okay.
So I'm back. Jennifer, can I share my screen?
Sure you can. I've got it up if you want me to share too.
Let me try. Let me try first.
Perfect.
Have I successfully shared?
Yes, you have.
All right, terrific. Sorry about that. I lost a couple of screens while I was trying to unmute. Jennifer, do you want to say anything? Or should I just go?
Now, I just did the same thing. So the board knows that we've started with a planning committee from Thomas Paine. We've been meeting, we were a little slowed down. Our first meeting was right around spring break when we were to come out of spring break. And of course, we weren't able to do that because of COVID, but we got right back on track really quickly. We have a great group of teachers, a really diverse group. We have fine arts, PE, SPED teachers and OT, classroom teachers. So it is a really diverse group of staff, some who are new to the building, some who have been there for multiple years. The current principal has been involved, as well as the new principal, Mr. Majors, has sat in. We have secretaries, we've met with custodians. So I think we've gotten off to a great start with this planning team. Kim has led a lot of the discussions as well. Randy's been involved. So Riley's gotten to know the planning group a little bit, and he had several meetings with all of the special groups. So like a K2 meeting, a 3-5 meeting. And surprisingly, I think we were all a little surprised. It went very well via Zoom. We just sharing and discussing and having lots of pictures and aerial views of things. So, we got a little behind schedule, which is why we need that July meeting to bring you guys the concept a few weeks after we'd originally planned. But I think we're going to get back on track really quickly. So Riley's going to share the conversations that we've had with staff, and you'll get to see ultimately by the end of this the beginning of a program.
Correct. Thank you, Jennifer, and thanks to Jennifer, Kim, and the administration at Thomas Paine and the teachers and the staff over there. They have given abundantly of their time in the last month or so. So I want to report. The board authorized some time ago us to take the first step on the Thomas Paine project, and that step is the first phase of work was the programming and concept planning phase, and you can see the phase 1 program development is highlighted in yellow there. And that's the phase that I want to report on. And remember what the objective of that phase is: to fully understand Thomas Paine operations, facilities, deficiencies, and then come up with a functional space program. And that space program provides the needs that will require response in the phase 2 of this work, which is the concept planning. And we'll develop alternative ways, physical organizations of the space needs, so that we can all analyze those and come up with the best one. And that will be inclusive of a plan, a budget, and a schedule ultimately. So to give you a sense of the work that's taken place late April till tonight, I've highlighted in this Thomas Paine meeting schedule the meetings that have taken place. I've highlighted them in yellow. Met with the administration and the office staff at Thomas Paine, fine arts, PE, primary, intermediate, special programs, food service, library, etc. So we've talked to every element of the school, every subset of the planning team, and they have informed us of the existing conditions at the building, any deficiencies that they're experiencing, and of course the needs and wants of the various groups. And that has been the basis for pulling together this program tonight. Here's an aerial of Thomas Paine, and you guys will remember the original 1963 building, the 1972 addition, the 2015 parking and circulation rehab. What's not shown on here is an existing walking path that's been provided by the PTA, I think, at Thomas Paine. But the reason I'm showing this aerial to you right now is I want all of you to kind of recollect what we have identified as the district project goals for this project in the past. This may not be all inclusive, but it will remind you of what we're after. And many of these were initiatives that the board decided on a long time ago for all of the elementary schools. The first being new gymnasium with a full stage, the new fine arts classrooms, then the dedicated dining and multipurpose room, any HVAC upgrades that need to take place with an emphasis on providing central air conditioning throughout the facility. If you remember at Yankee Ridge, we had a window replacement program that preceded the bigger project, and it would appear here at Thomas Paine that we need window replacement work. These bigger projects also want to incorporate any remaining health and life safety work, and you know, correct any deficiencies or problems with the existing building. You can't expand and renovate a building without then completing the building on its site. So there will be a certain amount of site improvements as part of the project. We'll go through an ACM abatement prior to any construction. And the assumption at this stage for this project is also to plan for a 3-strand school. So I just wanted to provide those district project goals as background as we begin to walk through this preliminary program of space needs, which again is our menu for actually designing the new facility. So in this preliminary program of space requirements, again, assuming 3-strand is desired at this stage, I've broken up the various spaces into categories of space. The first group, looking at the gray bar, are the gen ed classrooms. The far left column gives you the space name, and then we have 2 more columns. The first is the existing column, and the second is the proposed column. The existing column basically tallies up all of the existing spaces in the building as we go through it. The proposed is what we're proposing as our space, our new space needs. So in the gen ed category, looking at the proposed and understanding that we're shooting for a 3-strand school, we have basically 3 classrooms each for K through 5. And I'm going to kind of go through this program fairly rapidly, given the hour of the night, and then we can come back and delve into any particular area that you would like. So again, 3 classrooms at each grade level, K through 5. To note at the bottom here is the existing gen ed classrooms occupy about 12,794 square feet in the existing building. And by moving it to the 3-strand, we have a need of about 16,443. One other thing to point out here in the gen ed classrooms is there's a significant shortage of storage space accompanying these classrooms. So there were some large shared storage spaces added to the program here. Primary K2 shared storage and intermediate 3 through 5 shared storage space. Those spaces would be located within the immediate area of those classroom groupings. The next section, the next section is section 2, instructional space again, but this time the special education and services spaces. We currently have 3 SPED classrooms for cross-cat for K2 primary, and we're proposing that same amount for the future. You'll see that in some cases I've adjusted the exact amount of space required for the various rooms, but there's not a significant adjustment typically. Also, there are 2 existing SPED classrooms for intermediate, and after talking with the administration and the school staff, it's thought that 2 3-5 SPED classrooms would be appropriate for the 3-strand school. All right, come on here. Okay, we have a literacy intervention classroom that will continue forward. There are what we call SPED resource classrooms. There's currently 2. We're proposing 3 of those for the 3-strand. There's a significant lack of meeting space within the Thomas Paine facility. Frankly, the only conference room available to everybody right now is within the main office area. So we're introducing a staff meeting room for 10 to 12 as part of the program. They're going to be dispersed throughout the new facility. There's going to be a couple more. They'll be dispersed in the facility, with one probably being in the SPED classroom area because there's a lot of meetings that go on there. There's a need for more storage in the SPED classroom areas, so that is shown. There's a social work classroom, sensory therapy room, instructional coach's office, speech language service office, and psychological services office also, and those all move forward into the new program. The next category is, again, instructional, but this is the fine arts and the makerspace. You'll see right now, I think there are only 2 rooms being used for fine arts at Thomas Paine. One is the art classroom, and I believe it's being shared by music. And then there's another dance drama classroom. So following previous models, including the Yankee Ridge model, we'll have dedicated art, music, and dance drama classrooms, and each of them will have their own dedicated, secure adjoining storage room. Again, this is a model that was created at Yankee Ridge, which has met with, which has been judged to be a pretty good approach. So we're going to do that again at Thomas Paine. Thomas Paine currently has a makerspace, and will continue to have a makerspace, and I think / coding space, if I'm not mistaken. Right now, it's located in one of the existing classrooms. However, it is encumbered by a tech workstation, reducing the amount of space for the makerspace. So we're suggesting that a full classroom space should be allocated to the makerspace. Moving on to the administration staff support spaces. If anybody has been to Thomas Paine, if anybody has been to Thomas Paine before, you will understand that the main office area is extremely tight and lacking in almost every regard. So it's been reprogrammed to be adequate in every respect. It will. It starts with a security vestibule at the main entry to the school, which of course is controlled by the secretaries. The main office will be enlarged to provide proper workstations for the secretaries. Waiting, there will be legitimate waiting space for maybe up to 4 provided, along with appropriate standing space at the service counter and appropriate circulation space to move to the rest of the facility. We're going to increase storage in the main office. We're going to include the family resources storage in the main office. And we're going to provide some area for a child support space, basically a waiting area for kids. Then we have a principal's office, obviously. The existing facility has a undersized, non-accessible principal's toilet. Since very few or no other principal's offices have toilets within those spaces, we're not going to provide that here. We'll provide a toilet within the main office suite for everyone. And then we've programmed in an assistant principal's office based on our conversations here, particularly as it relates to going to a 3-strand school. Again, there will be an administrative conference room still in the main office, and the single-use accessible toilet that I just referred to. The nurse's office is undersized currently, will be expanded some, and probably located outside of the office area. That's causing some difficulties now because it's actually accessible within the main office. There will be some sick child space added to the nurse's office. It'll be outside the main office, but probably close to it, hopefully. The teacher's lounge with a kitchenette is undersized at Thomas Paine, and that will be hopefully corrected, much like it was at Yankee Ridge. And we would hope to provide the single-use toilet and phone room adjoining the teacher's lounge. Teacher's workroom is reasonably sized, maybe a little undersized. We'll correct that, but one of the major talking points about the teacher's workroom is to have a second copier available to them because right now, again, they have to go into the main office, further exacerbating the traffic at the main office to do their copy work there. So we would hope to correct that. Also part of the staff support space is the mentor coordinator room. That is expanded modestly. It's basically an office with a small meeting, mentoring or gaming table capability. And then here is, in terms of staff support, here is another staff meeting room, the second staff meeting room outside the main office to support that function. And I forgot to talk about this, the SPED. Going back to the SPED instructional spaces, you saw the existing building is 7540, a modest increase to 8607. For the fine arts, that's a fairly significant increase, 2478 to 4034. And at the administration space, about a doubling of the existing space, 1447 to 2830. Next category is the core common areas. The first item up is the gymnasium. The existing gym and the existing gym combination dining hall is about 3,036 square feet. And using, again, the same model as we've used in King, Williams, and Yankee Ridge in the past. That new gymnasium would be more on the order of 5,125 square feet, along with appropriate gym or PE storage of about 600 square feet. At Thomas Paine, the physical education office is located at the far south of the facility, very remote from the gym. We would propose to correct that and right size that space. That actually goes down a little. They have a very active PTA at Thomas Paine, and active to the point where they would like some storage space on site for the various events that they host. And so we have, at this point in time, we've dedicated some storage space to PTA. One of the reasons we're doing that is because the PTA storage is now encumbering PE and custodial storage. So this corrects a problem that exists. Along with the new gymnasium comes the new stage, which is upsized considerably from what exists there, and also has an appropriate storage element associated with it. Then at Thomas Paine, the existing gym then would be that 3,000 square foot space would be converted into the dedicated dining and multi-purpose space. There is existing table and chair storage affiliated with that space, which would remain for that purpose. The existing kitchen at Thomas Paine is intended to be a satellite kitchen and still served food via the middle school, I believe. And it's appropriately sized, so it has an appropriate food prep area and it has appropriate storage areas. So those will be carried forward as they are. The only problem, or not the only problem, but the main problem at Thomas Paine is the serving relationship. There's not enough frontage to the existing gym space or now dining hall to properly serve the kids as they move through the serving line. So that has to be corrected. The existing library is 1143, and we know from past discussions and recent discussions that the library real estate needs to be expanded, primarily because a number of the stacks are inaccessible. They need to be brought down to a lower level, and the space between stacks is too narrow and also inaccessible. And we have this tension between stack space and the desire to have more open people and flexible use space within the library, which leads us to the desire to have more real estate for the library. And what we intend to do is we intend to take that existing stage and turn it over to library use. We think, at least early thinking is that, which would add about 300 feet to the library space. The issue to be resolved there is that the existing stage is up from the existing floor of the library, so it's inaccessible or unaccessible, and we will have to resolve that somehow, either via a ramp to make it accessible, or more likely bring the level of the stage down to the level of the existing library. The library office is adequate and will remain. There's what they call a teacher resource storage area within the library, which is accessed regularly by teachers coming in and out to get materials for their classroom and return them. That will remain. And then part of the core common area is the literacy library, which is currently in a space along with a number of other storage items, as well as a fire alarm annunciator panel and network equipment. So what we're hoping to do is find a dedicated storage area for the literacy library.
So Riley, when you were sizing the library, there's another figure there of 822 square feet. Is that the classroom that a long time ago was already annexed into the library?
Yes, I'm sorry, John, that's correct. The library is actually comprised of the south space, if you will, 1143, and that north area of 822. That's correct.
And that's to stay.
Thank you. Moving on to building support space, building service and support space. We're basically talking about toilet rooms and mechanical rooms, et cetera here. All of the existing multi-fixture toilet rooms will remain, we think, at this stage and are shown as such, but our meetings have revealed that they're in quite poor condition and we can expect to have to renovate them. That includes 3 sets of boys and girls bathrooms, those first 6 entries. Then also as part of our discussions, it became apparent that due to the toileting needs of some of the special needs children, there probably ought to be a dedicated set of bathrooms for that user group. And so that's been programmed in here. And as we have done at a number of elementary schools now, we're including a laundry room that can be, to take care of soiled clothing and other things, as well as maybe reinforced life skill teaching. And then another aspect of our discussions was I guess I would call it the extreme lack of staffed toilet facilities at Thomas Paine. Let me see here. Yeah, I believe there is 1 set of dedicated staff toilets at Thomas Paine outside of the main office. 1 existing single-use women's toilet, 1 existing single-use men's toilet. And what we're proposing is instead of that, to provide 4 gender-neutral toilets, 4 of them sort of dispersed throughout the facility to provide better opportunity, primarily for staff needs. Then obviously we're assuming that we're expanding Thomas Paine. So we're expanding it to the size that we believe that a new set of boys and girls toilets would be needed to accompany the expansion. There are a number of existing custodial areas throughout the facility. There's janitor supplies, most of which will remain in use. There's a janitor's office existing to remain. There's a small storage area affiliated with that janitor's office. And then going back up, because of the expansion again, we would expect to have another janitor supply storage area accompany that expansion. We have an existing boiler room, and I would note that that's including in a grossing factor below, so there's no space requirement here for that in this list. There's another boiler room There's a main boiler for the original school. There's a secondary heating boiler for the 1972 edition. And depending on how the heating, ventilating, and air conditioning upgrades go, what kind of a system is used, this space may remain and have to be used for a boiler, or it may be, this space, if a different system is appropriate to reheat and recool the building that doesn't require this boiler space, that space could be liberated and used for some other function potentially. And then again, thinking about the gym, fine arts classrooms, and maybe other classroom expansions, we will probably need a mechanical room for that, an electrical room for that. We think that there ought to be a dedicated building technology room somehow centralized within the facility. To give you a little background there, the server for the building is the server, and the tech assistant workstation is actually located in the maker space, which is at the far south end of the 1963 original school. There is network equipment in a storage room in the middle of the school. We think all of that should be consolidated into its own dedicated space. And we're calling it a building technology room, and it's sized accordingly. And then this facility also happens to suffer from a lack of general building storage. So we're proposing to provide some additional storage for that. So you can see again on the building service and support level, we've gone from about 2156 existing square feet to about 3643. So, and I know that was fast, and we can dig back into anything you want, but the bottom line is Thomas Paine existing as we have it today is a 42,580 gross square foot facility. And the building grossing factor for it is 1.28. What a building grossing factor again is the corridors, hallways, the area the walls take up, and the mechanical, electrical equipment areas. 1.28 tells me that the building is a little tight. So moving over to the proposed, we have a proposed area of 48,908. I've loosened up the grossing factor a little bit at 1.35, and that generates a new proposed area for the expanded Thomas Paine facility of 66,026. And in the red there, I just put in that for comparison purposes. When we think back to Yankee Ridge existing facility before we started was 41,060. And by the time the project was built, designed, built, and reoccupied, we had expanded that facility to 66,975, 3-strand facility. What that tells me at this very early stage is there's some correlation to the two facilities. Converting Thomas Paine to 3-strand is following a similar course to converting Yankee Ridge to a 3-strand. I think that's, and that's all I can really say right now is there's a correlation there. That doesn't mean the budget correlates, although it could. So moving on a little bit, to complete a building on its site, we have to consider a number of things as well. And they're listed here. Obviously, the staff and parent parking lot, that's the one to the north, has 43 parking spaces. There's a staff parking lot to the south, closer to the main entry, that has 25 spaces. What can be said about the parking is it's relatively adequate. It's actually more parking than was provided ultimately at Yankee Ridge. What's not so good is that north lot is quite remote from the main entry. And we've talked about the need for more visitor parking closer to the entry. And despite the 2015 site improvements for parking and circulation, there apparently are still some issues there. There are some there's some vehicular pedestrian conflict issues and some traffic backup issues that need to be resolved. And we can talk about those more later, but it's not perfect yet. Let's put it that way. Bicycle parking spaces, racks, existing, I think are 12, maybe 15. The zoning, Urbana zoning would ask us to have 38 there. In talking with Dolores and others, 38 is well in excess of what the demonstrators' need has been over time. So that will merit some future discussion as we pin that requirement down, if you will. The bus stacking and the parent stacking, the bus drop off and pick up, and the parent stacking and drop off and pick up. There's adequate queue space for everybody, but again, there's either an operational problem that's causing some difficulties and or a physical problem or some combination of both that we have to get to the bottom of. We also have, we'll have to deal with playgrounds. A couple of things that we know is the K2 playground is located immediately north of the original 63 building. And it is, and we have a service drive that bisects the building exit that leads to the primary playground. So we have a conflict there. And the service drive is used to make deliveries to the kitchen and other items to the school. So it would be nice to resolve that conflict. The intermediate playground is located due east of the building. And again, that's bisected. The building and the playground are bisected again by the service drive that extends along the backside of the building. And so that would be something that needs to be resolved. There is, as many of you are aware, there's a sort of an internal outdoor courtyard between the 63 and the 72 buildings there. It's a PTA managed sensory garden, which is liked by many, but it's also problematic in the sense that it's not accessible. And there may be some building envelope challenges with it. It also is immediately adjacent to some windows of some classrooms. So there's some activity conflict there. So there's a number of ideas about the courtyard garden floating around, including possibly relocating it to the outside of the building and then potentially shelling in that space and reassigning it for other use. Sidewalks will have to be adjusted, some repaired and some expanded to accommodate an expanded facility. The disposition of the walking path that I mentioned earlier will have to be looked at relative to wherever the expansion might happen. If there is a ground-mounted mechanical, if there's ground-mounted mechanical equipment, it would be nice to screen and secure that from view. Same thing with dumpster enclosure. And then this project may involve new or relocated or modified site utilities or building services. And then because we're creating more impervious surface area, we will probably have to add to our on-site stormwater detention. So I know that was fast, but that's the menu so far that we would like to use to proceed into the concept planning phase. So any questions?
Any questions from board members?
I appreciate your and the committee's work in getting these together. This is a a great next step in this process, and looking forward to moving forward.
My comment is it's fairly much what I expected. I'm sure there'll be other little details that will come forward. My commitment remains strong to a 3-strand school, and I'm glad you carried forward with that.
Anyone else? Well, thank you, Riley. I'm really looking forward to talking more about it in July, and I'm excited to see the plans. I mean, it sounds to me like a 3-strand is going to be great, and Yankee Ridge is already, loving all the spaces that they've got, and I'm sure the students at Thomas Paine and the teachers especially, because I've heard some things from them about the bathrooms and things like that, among other things that they're looking forward to updating. So thank you. I look forward to seeing more about it.
Thank you. And yeah, we, in terms of the schedule, we would hope to bring at least a couple of different concept alternatives to you in, when is it, very early July. And those concept alternatives we would hopefully be reviewing in terms of its the pros and cons or the features, judging the merit of each scheme, and then also we'll be preparing a cursory total project budget for each scheme, so that can also be a criteria for assessment of the schemes.
Got it. Great.
Okay.
Well, thanks again, Riley, and thanks for sticking with us this late tonight.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. And I guess that was it for all of our study topics for this evening. So we do have one call for the future special executive meeting, which is on July 7th, as we talked about, a month from now at 6:30. Next up, superintendent's report.
Well, due to the lateness of the hour, I'm going to pass. I don't have a lot to share. So,
okay.
Thank you guys. It was a busy night, a lot to cover.
Thank you. Okay, board reports. Do we have any board members with reports for tonight?
I just very quickly want to compliment the secondary staff for the graduation, the video of the graduation ceremony at both at the high school and then also the promotion ceremony at the middle school. And hopefully we can continue to do an in-person graduation ceremony on July 25th.
Fingers crossed.
Yes.
Any other board members with reports tonight? Nope. Okay, well, and I don't have anything to add either, so I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No, motion carries. We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.